So what I want to show here is documents that have the idea of defending the family existed at least 7 years, 1988, before the church ever comes up with the Proclamation of the Family. We know that copies of the Family Manifesto were given to LDS representatives and high-ranking Utah businessmen and party members at the 1988 Republican Convention. We also know that it was given to people at the Democratic Convention as well. It shows up in national newspapers as part of the national discourse in 1988, 89. And then we know that through Skousen and other conservative groups in Utah, that there's a connection between the political aspirations and need to defend traditional values of the moral majority and Mormons in Utah. Okay, and this, by the way, carries very closely over to the support in Utah for people like Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk started the Fall Kirk Foundation with Jerry Falwell Jr. All right, and if you look, so think of that dynamic where you have Mormons who are very conservative, they're very right wing, they're very traditional family, they're getting involved with these narratives that support their biases. All right. And, if you want to consider how that works, just think about Utah politics and their support for Charlie Kirk is kind of the same way as it would have been for the Falwells only. During the 1980s, Mormons were still very prejudiced against Baptists, and Baptists still very prejudiced against Mormons. So the fact that Utah newspapers did not pick up on the existence of the Family Manifesto makes a lot of sense, because outside of the political, the political connections and the fellow traveler nature of the political causes, most Mormons didn't care about what the Baptists were doing. But when it came to legal issues and court issues, the Mormons and the Baptists, like the Falwells, they agree on almost everything.
Right.
Okay.
Unlikely bedfellows, I think is what they call
Unlikely
it. And
bedfellows. Yeah.
you were kind of saying that Cleon Skousen, he had access to the apostles, the brethren. He was in
Yes.
the upper echelon. People knew of him, his work. I mean, my parents were Bircher, Benson, Skousenites, right? So, to me, Skousen, hand in glove with all the upper leadership. I feel like what he was aware of, he was kind of a conduit perhaps from,
That's right.
Faldwell, Baptist, what they were doing to the leadership. So,
Yeah. Now
to
let me,
me, that's a connection, at least a possible
yeah.
connection.
Well, let me be clear. I did reach out to what's his name?
Matt Harris.
Matt Harris.
Yeah.
And I asked him if there was connections between Benson and
Uh-huh.
Falwell. And Harris's response was, look, by the time we're into the 1980s, Benson's health was very, very low. Cleon's was not, however. And so Benson may not have been involved, but he was definitely involved in Bircher material. He used to send Bircher pamphlets to general authorities and people all over the place. So I can't show where the Family Manifesto is handed off to a member of the 12. I can't show where they used it. I can't say, well, they had a copy of this, they took it into a back room. It's kind of like, did
Cross
Joseph
out
Smith have
this,
scriptures
underline.
available? Yeah. But what we can show is where the Family Manifesto has the exact same ideas. The difference between the two documents is where the statements in the Family Manifesto are kind of vague. The Proclamation of the Family takes those same ideas and turns them into paragraphs, almost like they're Egyptian hieroglyphs. So let's look
Perfect
at this.
example.
So this is a comparison, and so I think we should just go do these one at a time, right? So I'll go ahead and do the first one. Okay. So the first side on the left hand side of the screen is the Family Manifesto from 1988. The right hand side of the screen for me is 1995, the Family Proclamation. So I'll go ahead and read the first one, and Landon, I'll let you read the second way. We can kind of go through it that way. 1988, we proclaim that marriage is a covenant of divine origin, whose purpose, by divine intent, is the mutual support and assistance of spouses, the procreation, nurture, and education of their children. Now, the Family Proclamation. We solemnly proclaim that marriage between a man and a woman is ordained of God, and that the family is central to the Creator's plan for the eternal destiny of his children. Okay.
It's like they put it through Chat GPT and said, rewrite this different, but better, but a little more solemn, right?
Well, more accurately, they ran it through Crichton and McConkie and said, how do
Yes.
we flesh out this
Yes.
language to really illustrate our beliefs so we can
Right.
use it in court. So, Landon,
You
go
have
ahead
a
and read the
comment,
second one.
Landon? Yeah, I think
Yeah,
you.
I love this one. So the Family Manifesto, we proclaim that male and female were established by the Creator in their diversity with equal dignity and complementary value. The Church's Family Proclamation, all human beings, male and female, are created in the image of God. Each has a divine nature and destiny. Gender is an essential characteristic of individual premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose. Notice on this that the evangelicals said that male and female were established with equal dignity and complementary value. They're equals. Yet the LDS had to change that and had to say uh, gender is essential characteristic of individual premortal, mortal, and they say that they each have a divine nature and destiny, which is based on their gender. So the church has to say they're not equal because at this time the temple has a ceremony that says that the wife, she has to give it to her husband and not they're not equal.
That's
So
right. The husband covenants with God, and the wife covenants to the husband, making her subordinate to the husband.
correct. She
Yes.
subordinates herself, and so they can't say they're equal and then go into the temple. So it's the same wording, but they change it just slightly to say that they're, that women are. They don't say they're not equal. They just say gender plays into this. They're not quite
Yep.
equal.
Okay,
Yeah.
Rebecca, you are number three.
Yep, I'm number three. Yeah, I was going to say about that other one. Yeah, each has a special purpose, right? It's not that you're different, but you have a certain purpose, right? They
Yep.
say it so perfectly to just, take that idea from the manifesto and make it their own kind of. Okay. From the manifesto in 1988, it says, we proclaim that every child has the right to a religion and a system of values instilled from his or her earliest awareness. And 7 years later, the Family Proclamation from the LDS Church says, in the primordial realm, spirit sons and daughters knew and worshiped God as their eternal father and accepted his plan. So again, they just kind of Mormonized it, right? Instead of saying they have the right to a religion, like the evangelical said, they make it more specific. You had a premortal existence, you knew God's plan, but you should be raised with that in mind. Is kind of how I
Yeah.
took that one.
Yeah, I would add to that the earliest awareness from Mormonism is before you can remember it.
Mhm.
Okay, so you accepted this in your early so yeah, it's every child has a right and you have a right to Mormonism. Okay.
Yeah, it shows the difference in the theology because
Yes.
evangelicals, you didn't exist until you were born, so
Mhm.
your right came at birth, and Mormons say your right came from premortal
Yeah.
existence.
Yeah.
Now, I want to make it clear to the audience. We're not saying that the proclamation plagiarizes this.
Mm-mm.
What we are saying is that the ideas, the need to defend, the ideas that are found in there are so similar that this is derivative of that. It's Mormonized, it's expanded, it's created to meet Mormonism. But if you look at the message is virtually the same. Okay. We deny that children are a resource of measurable value, whose supply could therefore be found excessive by invalid social optimization. Basically, we deny that children should be aborted. Okay.
And
And
that's the
yeah, that's
manifesto. The
manifesto. The
early.
proclamation is we declare that God's commandment for his children to multiply and replenish the earth remains in force. So the manifesto, children are not excessive. They are valid. They deserve life. They are not a resource whose supply can be found excessive. There's no such thing as excessive children. Therefore, abortion is bad. The proclamation is the command to multiply and replenish the earth remains in force. Therefore, abortion is bad. Okay. Landon, we proclaim.
We proclaim the marital relations between husband and wife are the only means of transmitting human life. The
And
family
that's the
proc
manifesto. Yeah.
That's the manifesto. The proclamation is we further declare that God has commanded that the sacred powers of procreation are to be employed only between man and woman lawfully wedded as husband and wife.
Yeah. So the only difference between this is the statement. Marital relations between husband and wife. God has declared the sacred powers of procreation only to be implied between man and woman lawfully wedded. The exact same idea, but just it was like they just added more words to it. Okay. Let's see here. You are the next one. You are 4.9.
I'm the next one. And I would still say that some of the wording is identical here and there. And I mean, the concepts, of course, broad or, a little more minute, but even some of the wording, I was surprised, that they just added a few adjectives here and there. So, I mean, we'll let our viewers and listeners decide. But to me, I've gone over it several times and I mean, things are pretty close. So this one says, and I'm reading the manifesto first. We proclaim that our children exist and deserve our protection as children from the moment we conceive them. Okay, that's the manifesto. And 7 years later, the church in its proclamation says, we affirm the sanctity of life and of its importance in God's eternal plan. So again, this is another statement like the other one, sanctity of life and protection from conception, a very important part of both documents.
It's the same idea expressed differently. Mm-hmm. You protect the sacred, right? And so all they did was swap the word deserve protection for life is sacred and important. Okay. We proclaim that children, this is the Manifesto 88, we proclaim that children are the fulfillment of marriage and a blessing to their parents. Okay. And then on the other side, 1995, husband and wife have a solemn responsibility to love and care for each of their children. Children are a heritage of the Lord. Okay, so the fulfillment of marriage is the purpose of marriage. Okay, and on the LDS side, it is responsibility to love and care for your children because they are a heritage. Well, what's a heritage? A heritage is what you come from. It's the purpose. It's what you pass down. Okay, again, the same general concept. It is the fulfillment of marriage. It's a blessing to the parents. And it's your heritage. It's what you carry with you. It's what you give on. You have a responsibility to keep it safe. Okay. Landon, you are next.
Okay. The manifesto.
4.3.
Yeah. We proclaim that husband and wife have the responsibility and the inalienable right to rear their own children. And then the proclamation, children are entitled to birth within the bonds of matrimony and to be reared by a father and a mother who honor marital vows with complete fidelity.
So what they've done here is they've switched it. Instead of saying that mother and father have the responsibility to rear their children, they're saying children they're entitled to a mother and father. They've just switched the language. You could very well say that mother and father have the responsibility to rear their children who are entitled to their care. Right? It's the exact same idea.
This is exactly how I wrote my papers in college.
Yep.
I'd find something that I was supposed to write about it, and then I'd reword it.
No, I mean, and the thing is, we've all done that, right? We've all looked at a quote and go, okay, I really like this quote. I don't know how to attribute it, or I don't know where it comes from. How do I rewrite it so it doesn't show up as mirroring this other quote, right? Okay, so yeah, so it's stunning. So Rebecca, you are 4.6.
I'm the next one. I'm telling you, it's Chat GPT where you say, please rewrite this in a different way so it looks like God told us to do it. Yep. That's exactly it. Okay. Next, from the Christian Manifesto here in 88, we reject the ideologies and fashions which delude us within the hope that material things such as toys and entertainment can compensate for human interaction in the rearing of children. Okay. And then the Family Proclamation kind of says it in a different way. Successful marriages and families are established and maintained on principles of faith, prayer, repentance, forgiveness, respect, love, compassion, work, and wholesome recreational activities. And I will add that the manifesto part of it almost sounds like no success can compensate for the failure within the home, right? It's just this idea that what you do in the home is the most important. So the very same concept.
Yeah. So, the ideologies and fashions, wholesome recreation activities, it's basically saying that the focus should be should be above these distractions, right? So and then I'll go for the next. We proclaim, this is 2.3. We proclaim that the role of the male is most effectively that of provider, and the role of female is one of nurture. Okay? And then the Family Proclamation says, by design, by divine design, fathers are to preside over their families in love and righteousness, and are responsible to provide the necessities of life and protection for their families. So most effectively, that of provider. Mothers are primarily responsible for the role of nurture of their children. Now, this has always been fascinating to me, right? Because this is the male concept is so much more fleshed out, which tells you that women had no say in this, right? Because it's like a bunch of guys in the room go, "Hey, what are we supposed to do? Oh,
Do women
we
do?
love our families and we're righteous and we provide and we give protection." So that's the guys. And what do the women do? Oh, well,
Yeah.
they nurture.
Yeah.
They make us cookies while we're at priesthood session. Okay.
Surprised they didn't
Print
add
it.
make donuts, right? That's what they should have added there. But they did use the same words in both.
Yes.
Provide in both for the
And
husband and
nurture.
nurture in both for the wife.
Yeah,
So
with no deviation as to the concept of either, by the way.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so Landon, you are 5.1.
Okay, the manifesto. We proclaim that this situation is an achievable goal toward which, apart from grave criminal cases, our energies should be directed. And then the proclamation, disability, death, or other circumstances may necessitate individual adaptation. So they're kind of given the out. These situations may differ if one of these things happen.
Well, it's an achievable goal with a little bit of leeway. And so what they've done is basically say this is an achievable goal, but you may have to adapt yourself. So again, it's the same concept reworded, right? One just is more verbose than the other, but it's the same concept. All right, Rebecca, you're up.
yeah, let's see. Okay. From the manifesto, 1988, we proclaim that in order for its uniqueness and its irreplaceable identity, the extended family must be of economic importance to its members. So they're talking about support, right? And all the different people that could support the family. Proclamation, 7 years later, says the same kind of thing. Extended families should lend support when needed. So they're both talking about the extended family. I'm telling you, if you did a word by word comparison, some of these are so similar, but that idea that the buy-in from the extended family, right? Everybody has to support the nuclear family, the raising of children in righteousness, either evangelical or Mormonism. And it's really important that extended families on all sides, support. It's all part of it.
And these are too unique to just be coincidence.
Exactly.
Extended family, nurture,
Provide.
Yeah.
provide. We proclaim. Too close.
Every professor has had and with cheating papers. If you were a professor and you had a student who said, "I'm going to write a family manifesto here," and a student who said, "I'm going to write a family proclamation here," and you came in and you put them side by side, you would look at this and go, what are the odds?
One of you borrowed.
What are the odds that you would have 11 items that, while not exactly the same wording, are the exact same concept, just reworded? In some case, exchanging the exact same language. And there's one example in here, which we'll get to, which is so blatant. We all struggle with it.
And not just that, but using the same format where you're going, we proclaim, we solemnly proclaim, we declare, we deny, all these terms are being used in both. And then you even named it Family Manifesto, Family Proclamation. No doubt one of these came from the other.
Okay. I think I'm next.
You are.
So this is the 1988 manifesto. We reject those manifestations of antisocial attitudes and values which are much in evidence in popular culture, specifically hostility towards authority, promiscuous self-indulgence, and utilization of others for self-gratification. On the Family Proclamation, it states, We warn that individuals who violate the covenants of chastity, otherwise known as values which are evidence which are promiscuous self-indulgence and utilization of others for self-gratification, who abuse spouse or offspring, okay, which is, hostility, or fail to fulfill family responsibilities, stand accountable to God. So they take the exact same concept, they whittle it down a little bit, talking about the law of chastity, and then they add a idea of judgment on top of it, which I don't think shows up in the Family Proclamation, in the manifesto. But
yeah,
again,
and I was going to say that chastity shows up way more, of course, because the LDS are obsessed with chastity. So that has to be part of it, And then when it says, self-gratification, and that means shirking your responsibilities, basically. So it is the very same thing with a little dose of chastity reminder, of course, thrown in there. And you better do what you signed up to do, and that is care for your family, be faithful, and live in that.
And I would point to that those who abuse spouse and offspring, those are antisocial attitudes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so Landon, you are next, 7.5.
Okay, manifesto. For the good of our nation, for the good of society, and for the good of each human being individually. The proclamation, further we warn that the disintegration of the family will bring upon individuals, communities, and nations the calamities foretold by ancient and modern prophets.
Okay. For the good of our nation, for the good of society and each individual. Otherwise, the calamities will be upon individuals, communities, and nations. Yep. Exact same language and
just
expanded
reversed.
Concept.
It's a chiasmus, right? That's exactly it. It's right
this
there.
Is how you do this when you start copying other stuff. You just flip the sentences and go say it in reverse order. It's what you do when you're trying to rewrite something differently.
Okay. So, Rebecca, you are up next.
Yep, we're almost to the end here. So the Manifesto 1988 says, we proclaim that the institution of marriage must be upheld by society in prestige, recognized by law, in suitable statutes, and protected by government in public policy. That's an important one. And of course, the Family Proclamation from the church in 1995, we call upon responsible citizens and officers of government everywhere to promote those measures designed to maintain and strengthen the family. So here they are saying we must protect this by the suitable statutes recognized by the law. We call upon officers of the government and citizens. Is exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's the exact same idea. It's reworded. It's definitely distinct, but it's the exact same idea. Like I said, you could run this through ChatGPT and give me 5 different ways to explain this concept, and it would punch out 2 of these. Now, this is my favorite.
Yeah,
this is my favorite one. I'm really happy that I was hoping I'd be able to read this one. And if you're not watching on the screen, those of you who can see it on the screen, you've already read it at the very bottom. I guarantee you're already like gripping a stuffed animal and squeezing it because you can't believe this. But this is the last quote. 1988, the Family Manifesto. We proclaim that the family is the fundamental unit of society. Okay? 1995, the Family Proclamation. The family is the fundamental unit of society.
Let's all do a mic drop. Pick up your mic, drop it. There you go. Oh my, yeah. When I read that, there was no doubt right there. At that point, they just gave up. They said, you know what? They said it so well. We can't really change that. It's really impactful. We're just going to,
Oaks and Nelson wanted lunch and the meeting had gone too long.
That sounds fine.
But yeah, so I mean, it's wild. So I mean, the thing I want people to take away from this is that a lot of what we have in the church, when we're branded with, hey, this is ahead of its time, all that stuff, that narrative is put out there so that you will look at it and that you will automatically give deference to the leaders as being ahead of their time, and it will continue your faith in them and their positions of authority and power. Okay? Joseph Smith did it all the time. This document's the same way. Like I said, I can't show where Norm Bangerter or Orrin Hatch handed a copy of this off to Russell M. Nelson in 1988 and said, hey, this is really interesting. We got this at the convention. You might want to look into this. We do know that the Freeman Institute through Skousen had copies of this because he was very close with Falwell, and they exchanged information and documentation. And we do know that major business leaders and Republican Party officials who were at the 88 conference received copies of this, and they would have brought it home to Utah and talked about it and discussed it and handed it around. And we do know that when you do a side-by-side comparison of this document, which was contemporaneous to the church's issues, which was in reaction to expansions of LGBTQ recognition and community action across the country, when you compare it side by side with the Family Proclamation, you see that the items are the same. So a apologist, a member of the church will say, well, you have to prove that they had access to it. Just like they say, well, you have to prove that Joseph Smith had access to the Bible dictionary or any of that other stuff. We don't have to prove that they had access to it. We just have to show that the possibility that they had access to it is the most likely explanation for why this exists. And for me, my position is they knew about it, they referenced it, they used it as a template, and they moved forward from there. It wasn't a big deal in Utah. It wasn't covered in the press in Utah very much. And then when it came time to roll it out as a revelation, they cannot say that this document influenced what they did without undermining their own authority. And the narrative that was put out there, in my opinion, is false and misleading. So that's my spiel.
Yeah.
I've come up with a new name for Mormon Jesus, the great plagiarizer, because he clearly this has clearly been plagiarized. Now, in fairness, we should point out these numbers over here. You know, if you compare the two, it's not like these go line by line.
Right.
This was, paragraph 3.1 in the Family Manifesto corresponds with paragraph 1 in the Family Proclamation, paragraph 2.1 with paragraph 2. So when you read it, I mean, obviously the Family Manifesto was like 4 pages long. The Family Proclamation, I don't know, 1 or 2 pages long, depending on, where you print it at. There are other words in here than just these words that we compared, but the chances of these words being used in this role, this closely put together with two documents that were clearly referencing the family for amicus briefs for the exact same purpose by 2 different groups that had clearly cross-contamination with the Republican Party, even the Democratic Party, and with leaders of the church who
every pro-family group in Utah. Yeah. Every pro-family group.
Yeah.
The Eagle Forum would have had it. And how many Mormons in Utah do you know that were associated with the Eagle Forum and Gail Ruzicka over the years? What's the name of the big conservative think tank there? What's it called? The Sutherland
Institute. Yeah.
Yeah. They would have had, if they existed, any group like that would have had access to this. Okay.
Many of which are run by top level Mormon leaders.
Exactly.
There's no way they had not seen this or didn't know what it was and said, we need our own one of these that's like theirs, and that's where this came from.
And how many Mormons are attorneys, and what a big deal it was throughout the 1990s to get into these into these cases, right? And so they would have been looking for something that worked. More importantly, they would have been looking for something that echoed enough with the evangelical communities that the evangelical communities would join with them in these court cases, and that is exactly what has happened. They echoed evangelical language in their document, and that way the evangelical parties would have a buy-in with them to go to court for these cases, and you see that with the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church joins in on these cases. Okay? And they file with evangelical groups now across the country all the time. So that's what they were doing here, and that's what where the document is from. Now, for the believer that's watching this doesn't mean you can't say that they were inspired to pull it, because I think that the approach of the firm foundation or fair LDS will be, they'll say, well, a lot of revelations were predicated upon social events. We've shown that, right? And then, they'll say, well, this is just proof that the Lord gives you the tools you need and you have to make it work from there. So there's all kinds of apologetic ways to make this work. Now, for somebody like me who doesn't believe that that's the case, the most logical explanation is that they used this as a template. They knew it existed. They wanted to craft language that would create a buy-in from the evangelical community, and they did it with this.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely hit it on the head. And of course, there is that idea in the LDS Church that light and truth is given to other Christian organizations, other groups. So maybe this is an example of that. And it was simply a catalyst, right? We love that word in Mormonism. The Evangelical Family Manifesto was a catalyst for the Family Proclamation. But again, the reason that we're talking about this, like I said, so many articles about the proclamation of the family, and very specifically the article that I found that was taken down, that went through the steps and the events, almost as if they don't want to make that super clear or available to the faithful right there, because that article was taken down within 24 hours of being published. It was written by an intern. I looked up this little guy, intern, used to work at the Daily Universe, and they took it down. And the title of it was The Events that Led to, the crafting of the proclamation. And I think they just don't want that out there. And so why would that
be? Was the Family Manifesto mentioned in that timeline?
No, that's what I'm saying. Neither was Hawaii. The only thing that was mentioned there was how the women were prayerful and the women were involved, things like that. I just don't think, that's not true, as we know. And I don't think they want any kind of timeline. A timeline makes it look like it's not your lighted pen revelation, right? A timeline is you worked on it for a long time. Now, here's my question for Jim. So the fact that they took this article away, the fact that they have so many other articles about it, I feel something big, some kind of recognition is going to happen at conference, right? I don't know if it will be canonization. That is a little extreme, although now with President Oaks kind of at the helm and it's his baby, maybe. But I do feel there are going to be many mentions of it, singing its praises. So given everything we've talked about in this whole podcast, Jim, what would you hope that, maybe post-Mormons, nuanced Mormons might be able to, look critically at what's said at conference, maybe take some of this information to faithful family members? How should we use what we learned here on this podcast to kind of react or synthesize what we're most likely going to hear, kind of the fable or the fairy tale of the proclamation that we're going to hear at conference?
Okay, so my reaction to that would be is, I don't think that they'll canonize it. I think they've already come as close to canonization as they can possibly get by proclaiming it revelatory and everything else. They've got stuff, like I showed on the church website, that says it's already doctrine. Now, there was that weird post from Holland that said that there's new scripture coming.
Yes, I put that out. It did. He was holding the Book of Mormon. He goes, "We love this. And there's 100 times more of this. And we should be able to read, what we have here. And there's more scripture coming, everybody. I love you." That's what he said. So I know I have it memorized. Isn't that creepy? But I do.
So it's weird because they haven't hinted at new scripture ever. Since Oliver Cowdery was told not to translate.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I forgot about it, but that's huge.
So if they do canonize it, they will be canonizing it so that they can appear to be more conservative for the converts that are coming on board in Africa and other places where they are trying to really present this family this family thing. They will be doing that at the expense of members in the United States that have LGBTQ children. They know that they're going to lose some of those, but the canonization of the proclamation of the family would tie very closely into what we talked about last week with the Jesus land and the whole 9 yards, because then they can say, here is Jesus, here is his plan for you, and here is his plan for your family. And in a time of uncertainty, what everybody wants to know is whether their loved ones are okay. And so if they do canonize it, I think that's the reason, is because they want to tie that in with the temple redesign, all that kind of stuff, to give people reasons to attend the temple. Because right now, I think when they hand somebody Book of Mormon or Doctrine and Covenants and they say, oh, and here's this on top of that, it's a little bit confusing. You have this extra document. What does this extra document mean? Right? So if they're going to canonize it, that would be the reason. But I think what you're going to see is more celebration of the 30th anniversary. It's going to be more lip service. It's going to be more how great this is. And they will continue to reinforce its semi-canonical status, because right now it's semi-canonical. They've said it's revelatory. They've given it the status without actually giving it the status. So for the individuals who have watched this, one, don't fight with your family members. It's not worth it. You're not going to change their minds. You're not going to do anything by bringing this up in a negative way. My response would be, if it comes up and people are talking to you about it, you say, it's really interesting, because in 1988 there was this other document as well, and we can say that it was a deal, and the church also had their own document, and you can address that in a way to engage conversation without being accusatory. We don't have to say, well, the church plagiarized this, right? Address your family with respect. Address them with the fact that they don't know that this exists. So introduce it and talk about it, and talk about the social situations that led to it. But for God's sakes, don't fight with your family.
Especially not on conference weekend, right?
Not on conference weekend. It should be peaceful.
Good point. It's such a good point that you make, though, Jim. And exactly the idea of aligning yourself more with the Christian right? And all the other things that we've talked about that align your Mormonism with the Christian light, right? I mean, if you haven't watched our episode from last week about Jesus Land, take a look there. And there's been even more things that have come out since then. But it does remind me of what happened in the Methodist Church a couple years ago, which was exactly that. They have worldwide votes on policies, and it was, to allow same-sex marriage kind of a thing within the church. And there was everybody outside of the United States, like you said absolutely not. And this is a simplified version of what happened. But inside the United States, they said, of course, there was a schism because of this difference. Like you said, inside of the United States, a very different view on all of that. So that makes me think. That makes me really wonder about that.
Social opinions of members in the United States. I mean, if you look at some of the opinions, like you have a lot of young BYU students who accept gay marriage. They're okay with it. They're much more nuanced than the other generation. They do not carry over if you go to Africa or the places where the church is actually growing.
Exactly. And that's what happened with the Methodists. They actually had to split their church because their ideologies were so different. The other problem, of course, and most of you guys have probably thought this out, if they canonize it, I guarantee, at least I predict, someday same-sex sealings in some way are going to be allowed in the LDS church. It just has to go that way, just like the priesthood ban. Now, imagine if there had been something canonized, that would stop them from lifting the priesthood ban. They had to go back through everything to find, this was not a revelation. This was not. So it would be idiotic to canonize it, because they could never dial it back once they do that. Right now they can kind of skate back and say, it was just kind of a policy. It was kind of a,
if they wanted to do that, they would not be pushing it as hard as they are now. They are leaning into this.
I think some of them are. I think a few are. Others are probably like, be careful. Well, I don't know.
Look at all the publications.
Yeah.
The church newsroom does not publish stuff that is not approved by the brethren. It's not part of the messaging. And as we've seen, the messaging for Jesus Land and all the concepts behind that goes back, 5 years.
Yeah.
They are pushing the proclamation of the family. They are leaning into it. LDS Daily, I think, had an article about how the proclamation of the family influenced other pro-family proclamations, right?
Oh,
and
that's funny.
I think it was the Doha Proclamation or something like that. Of course, they don't mention that it was influenced by another one, but um,
Exactly.
they are leaning into the proclamation. You've got nine articles that you've noticed just in a little while. I think Jasmine Rapley did something about it a little while
Yeah.
back. So the marching orders have gone out that this is what they want to push, and they can't push the proclamation without pushing the definitions in the proclamation, which make it abundantly clear that there's really no room in the church for LGBTQ individuals. They're never going to be have the same thing that the heterosexual members have. And if they canonize it, which they might, because they're hedging their bets on growth in Africa, they're not hedging their bets in
Yeah,
growth in the United States, they're
true.
not hedging their bets on growth in Europe. Um, if they do that, it is the absolute death nail
Hmm.
to LGBT members who want to be included in their faith community.
I'd take that even a step further, because this is not just LGBTQ unfriendly. This is unfriendly if you're never married.
Hmm.
It's unfriendly if you're divorced. It's unfriendly if you grow up in a family where a parent died and remarried, and now you're coming from two different families and merging. Uh, it's unfriendly to every type of family that is not the standard nuclear family where everything goes just right for.
Yeah.
And members that are in that, which is going to be the majority of members, uh, are going to end up being in one of those other relationships, are going to say, where do I fit in with this church? And of course, the church's answer has always been, God will work all that out in the end. Don't worry about it. Yeah, well, you can make that same argument for LGBTQ then, if you allow them and just say, hey, God will work it all out in the end. Be happy on earth and he'll figure it out afterwards. You could make that same argument. But
Pay
that to
your
me is where
tithing and
this
you'll get
hurts.
it after you die.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just keep paying your tithing. You must have read that article, one of the 9 or 13 that Jim's talking about, because one of them in the church news said, not seeing yourself in the proclamation, right? So I'm like, well, now that's interesting. What does that mean? Exactly what you said, Landon. I mean, it's so funny because last time I saw a stat, 51% of the women in the church were single, whether that's never married, divorced, widowed, that's your demographic. And this article that said finding yourself was about a woman who hadn't gotten married or had children. So she was having a hard time seeing herself. Of course, then she did get married and have children, so it was fine. And just wait, like you said, Landon, and it will all be fine. Kick the football, kick the can down the way a little bit, wait till the next life, and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
The article didn't address anything that you said, Landon, but it's a legitimate question.
It doesn't address Wendy Nelson or what's Oak's wife's name?
Kristen, second polygamous
Kristen
wife.
Oakes.
Yes.
Neither one of them fall within this, because they're the second wife of
Right.
somebody
And never
in the
married and
eternity.
never had children.
And didn't have
And then
children
married a
and-
second wife.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's really fascinating is going back to that master plan episode, how many times do we see that language of seeing yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Right?
true.
They're really leaning heavily into this personalization, this concept that you should be able to look at every aspect, see yourself in the Book of Mormon. Like,
Mhm.
how does Nephi's, killing Laban appeal to you? Or, so yeah, this is all part of the rebrand, and it would be interesting to take a look at the messaging on the Proclamation of the Family and see if we can find elements of rebrand in that. I might do that just for the shiggles this week.
Get busy and original,
Yeah.
Jim. That's right. Another assignment. The bottom line is we will be watching very closely this weekend at what they are going to do and say about the proclamation. And I feel like almost every talk will have something about that. Although then I do wonder, now that President Nelson has passed away, if maybe they are rewriting some things. Maybe that thunder's a little stolen, because they're going to be talking about, the turnover, the new prophet. I mean, basically anything could happen. I think this is going to be hard to predict.
My biggest plan for conference is I've got a growler here, and I'm going to be taking a shot of every single time they say President Nelson or our beloved prophet. So I might be dead.
Proclamation. That's it.
Yeah.
So nobody try to reach out to or text Jim this weekend, because it's just not, he's not going to be able to answer. So.
Reach out to me on TikTok. Make sure I'm okay.
That's right.